Shalakaya Chakshunam Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadha Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. So we're continuing our study of Rag Vartman Chandrika, part 2. In part 1, we heard mostly about the path of Raganuga Bhakti. In part 2, the focus shifts more to the object of the path of Raganuga Bhakti. The object is Krishna. So I'm going to hear a lot about Krishna's qualities as it pertains to Raganuga Sadhakas though. In this first part of the second illumination, he wants to ask the question, who is hearing the prayers of the Raganuga Sadhakas? Because Krishna is absorbed in his lila, which is a state of bliss, and incomparable bliss that is all absorbing and all consuming. So if you're in the midst of all absorbing, all consuming bliss, how do you have any awareness of anything outside of that? Just like in the material world, we tend to get all absorbed in this thing and the other thing. And when there's that preoccupation, there's an absence of awareness of other subjects or objects. So who's hearing the prayers of the Raganuga Sadhakas if Krishna's absorbed in this incomparable bliss? Okay, so let's see what he says to this. Very interesting. So, okay, he starts here. So Sri Krishna is the embodiment of rasa and is always immersed in amorous pastimes, rasa vilas. Quote, surrounded by the beautiful Braj maidens, Sri Shamsundara, having accepted Cupid, Kandarpa, as his heart's nearest and dearest friend, is always so absorbed in romantic intrigues in Sri Vrindavana that he remains completely unaware of anything else, any kind of loss, lamentation, household duties, calamity, fear, anxiety, or defeat at the hands of his enemies, end quote. So this scriptural evidence reveals that Brajendra Nandana Shamsundar is so captivated by his loving affairs with Srimati Radhika and the other young wives of Braja that he has no chance to even think about anything else. Wow. This being the case, who then accepts the service rendered by countless Raganuga devotees situated in so many countries in all the directions? That's very kind of Sri Vishwanath to say. They're situated in all the countries. Really, even at his time? That's kind of him to say. Gives some hope for us. Who listens to the various kinds of prayers and praises they, the Raganuga devotees, offer to him. One may resolve this uncertainty by saying that the anksha or portion of Sri Brajendra Nandana, namely Paramatma, resides in the heart of every living entity. Since there is no difference between the portion and the origin, it is Paramatma who accepts the service and hears the prayers and hymns of the Raganuga devotees. This itself is Sri Brajendra Nandana's accepting and listening. However, for a Raganuga devotee of Krishna, such a proposition is as painful as a crippling disease. What then is the solution? Sri Uddhava provides an answer with these words, quote, "O my Lord, while pondering your duty in regard to killing Jarasandha, attending the Rajasuya Yagya, and performing other responsibilities, you called me over, and just like an ordinary, simple-minded person, you asked me, O Uddhava, what is my obligation in this situation? Although you are full of unlimited eternal knowledge, which is undivided and unimpeded by time and space, still you questioned me, just as an innocent person approaches someone wise for advice about some weighty matter. By simultaneously displaying childlike unawareness, mugdhata, and omniscience, Sarvagyata, you are bewildering me. So in Krishna Lila, Uddhava is, when Krishna's Dwarka Lila, Uddhava is his minister. He giving him advice on all sorts of things. But why does God require advice? So that question could be asked. His knowledge is not impeded by time and space. Unlike the conditioned souls, our knowledge is impeded by time and space. We forget, depending on the environment, we get distracted and so on. But this is not the case with the Supreme Lord. So why does he need counsel on anything? So Uddhava is bewildered by this, that you're simultaneously Mugdhata and Sarvagyata. So Mugdhata, translated nicely here as having a childlike unawareness, the quality of just being bewildered on the one hand, and on the other hand, you know everything. And both qualities are existing in the one Supreme Lord in Dwarka. That's Dwarka Lila. So Sri Vishnu says the answer to the query, who is hearing the prayers of the Raganuga Sadhaka, is answered in this particular verse. So let's see how he explains the verse to give the answer to the question. Uddhava is saying, some people say that in reality you are not perplexed, but are only acting so. And that though you appear to be bewildering me, I am not really bewildered. Some, I guess, Vaishnavas explain the verse in that particular way. However, such an explanation is inconsistent with the truth. One may try to justify such an interpretation by inappropriately citing seemingly relevant scriptural statements, such as Uddhava's proclamations, quote, you are without endeavor, yet you perform karma. And you are unborn, yet you take birth, which is the previous verse to the verse that was quoted. However, since this context is different, such an explanation is not proper. So we must accept Mugdhata, or Sri Krishna's quality of being innocently unaware in his Dwarka pastimes, despite the presence of Sarvagyata, his being omniscient. Similarly, in his Vrindavan pastimes, we are obliged to acknowledge Sarvagyata brought about by his inconceivable potency, despite the presence of Mugdhata. Leela Shuka Bilvamangala Thakur has given an identical explanation in Krishna Karnamrita. We see that the apparently contradictory qualities of Sarvagyata and Mugdhata coexist in each and every one of the Lord's pastimes. Therefore, we must accept this as being accomplished by his inconceivable potency. He's going to explain on this more in the next two, I think, phrases. But anyway, the answer here should be clear enough. In the Lord's Dwarka Lila, he's primarily omniscient, but because his Aishwarya mood is dominating them, but he is also exhibiting Mugdhata. So a sort of innocent unawareness of things, which allows him to be counseled by his devotees like Uddhava. So like that, also in Braja, he's saying this is true of all the forms of the Lord. So also in Braja, the Lord is primarily Mugdhata. He having a childlike unawareness of things, because that spirit allows for the playful pastimes of Krishna to take place. But even though that is the case, his Sarvagyata quality is always there. And so by his Sarvagyata quality, Krishna's Sarvagyata quality, he's able to hear the prayers of the Raganuga devotees. Even though by his other quality of Mugdhata, he is absorbed in the incomparable bliss of pastimes with his Braja associates. So this is how he's trying to answer this. He's going to elaborate on this a little bit more because he's unsatisfied with the explanations of other Vaishnavas, I take it, on this verse about how to understand Krishna's bewilderment. So their explanation is that Krishna is not really bewildered, and Uddhava is also not really bewildered. But Sri Vishwanath doesn't find that to be a satisfying explanation. And he's going to explain why in a couple of statements. So I just want to read his explanation first before we endeavor. So let's look at the next two statements. So someone may propose, one should understand that Sarvagyata here indicates an abundance of divine opulence devoid of sweetness, madhurya, while the Mugdhata that results from completely setting aside opulence and imitating human-like behavior is simply madhurya. So only dull-headed people speak like this. He's not happy with the explanation either. So this explanation, they're saying the Lord's Madhurya pastimes, he's setting aside all opulences, and that's what makes it the Madhurya Leela. Whereas in the Lord's other Leelas, the Lord's other Leelas, the Aishwaryas, they're without Madhurya. So he says this is not acceptable. Of course, on the strength of Bilvamangala Thakur statement, all the Lord's forms have both qualities simultaneously. This follows a general theological understanding about Bhagavan, that he is the repository of contradictory qualities. As should be expected, if you're an infinite reality, then nothing literally can exist outside of you. That is the meaning of being an infinite reality. So that means as an infinite reality, all contrary qualities must exist in you harmoniously. So therefore, for example, the Lord is the shelter of both the Achit and Chit Shakti, right? Achit Shakti means the material Shakti, the inert potency, and the Chit Shakti means the conscious potency, the spiritual potency. So the Lord is the shelter of both, even though these two Shaktis actually cancel each other out or are contrary Shaktis. You know, the one cannot exist in the other. So even though that is the case, the Lord is shelter of both of them. So this is a general theological point about the nature of Bhagavan. So also, all his forms are the repository of all sorts of qualities which are ordinary, cancel each other out, or are contradictory. So the example being given, of course, is omniscience and sweetness. So in any case, so if this is true for all the forms of the Lord, this is the conviction of Bilvamangala Thakur. So some Vaishnavas explain that Aishwarya means devoid of Madhurya, and Madhurya means devoid of Aishwarya. So Sri Vishwanath's not very happy with this explanation. Let me do this. Yeah. So let's see what more he wants to say. Okay, so next verse. Someone may propose, one should understand that Saragyata here. Oops, I read the part. So 3. The conclusion. Yeah, there we go. The conclusion regarding the Lord's aspect of unassuming sweetness, Madhurya, and related topics is that whether or not divine opulence is exhibited, if the mood of human-like pastimes is not transgressed even slightly, then it is called Madhurya. For example, when Sri Krishna killed the demoness Putana, he enacted the pastime of sucking her breast, behaving just like an ordinary human child, while smashing the terrifying and hard-hearted cart demon, Shakatasura, with his extremely tender lotus feet. Krishna maintained human-like behavior as a small baby of only 3 months, lying flat on his back. Even when Mother Jasoda could not bind him with the longest rope, Krishna appeared completely perturbed out of fear of her. In Brahma Vimohana Lila, having baffled Brahma, Baladev, and everyone else, Krishna was seen tending the cows and calves just like an ordinary human boy, even while personally remaining omniscient. Moreover, even though Krishna's great opulence, Aishwarya is present when he is seen performing the pastimes of stealing milk and yogurt and acting lustily toward the enchanting young cowherd maidens, that Aishwarya is not apparent. So Sri Vishwanath saying the conclusion about Madhurya is that even when the Aishwarya is clearly manifest, when the Madhurya aspect is not transgressed, then it is called Madhurya. In other words, and he's going to clarify this, the Madhurya quality is grounded on the Aishwarya quality. There is no meaning of calling the Lord's Madhurya Leela as such if he's not God, right? There would be no distinction between the ordinary conditioned soul and Krishna Leela if Krishna wasn't God. And to be God means to be having Shad Aishwarya Purna, right? That is the meaning of the word Bhagavan. He has all wealth, all fame, all strength, all knowledge, etc. I can't remember those here, all renunciation and all opulence. So that is the meaning of Bhagavan, Shad Aishwarya Purna. So when the Lord is Madhurya Leela is there, that means even though his Shad Aishwarya Purna quality can be clearly manifest in the pastime, but still he acts like a human. That is called Madhurya. So the examples are clear. When he killed Putana, so she is this gigantic demoness, but he never, he didn't like suddenly burst out of the baby form, have muscles, start flying around and, and killed her. He still acted like a baby, and he was sucking her breast like, like a baby would be nursed by the mother. And in that way, he killed her. So the killing part is the Aishwarya part, but he maintained his form like a baby. So that is called Madhurya. When he killed the Shakatasura demon, the cart demon, it is not that his legs suddenly became very long and he, it stretched and knocked the cart down. He kicked it, 200 meters away or something like that. No, just like a baby just kicking the legs, he was doing it. He kicked in the cart. Demon was killed. So the killing part is the Aishwarya part, but the remaining like a baby in Madhurya part. So that is called Madhurya. The other examples, I guess the other ones, Brahma Vimohan Lila, he expanded himself to replace all the different cowherd boys and calves, elder calves. And when he did that, it bewildered everyone in Braj. It bewildered even Balaram, who was also omniscient. It bewildered even Balaram. So that means that is the Ishat Aishwarya part. He was doing something that bewildered even Balaram himself. But while doing it, he remained like a cowherd boy, tending the cows, playing with the friends. So that is Madhurya Lila. So he's saying this is should be understood as the conclusion about what the Madhurya Lila means. It doesn't mean devoid of Aishwarya. It means that the Madhurya part is never diminished, even though there's the presence of the Aishwarya part. Okay, moving on. If the Lord's Mugdata were to be called Madhurya simply because without displaying any divine opulence, it corresponds with human activities, right? Then the Mugdata shown by any ordinary restless and playful child would also have to be called Madhurya. Therefore, it is completely wrong to explain Madhurya in this way, right? I already shared that point. Forgot it was coming. All right, what is the difference between an ordinary person and God? Well, the difference is God's Shad Aishwarya Purna. That's the difference. So only the Lord's Lila can be called Madhurya Lila. And the conditioned soul's activities are called as foolishness or vidya karma, right? The karma informed by the ignorance. Okay, he continues on, text 4. To exclusively manifest the sentiment of being the supreme controller of existence, Ishvara Bhava, while disregarding the human-like mood of Nara Lila, is called Aishwarya, right? So when revealing his magnificence, Krishna said to his parents, Sri Vasudev and Devaki, O father or mother, I have shown you my four-armed form just to remind you of your previous birth. Otherwise, if you had only observed my human-like characteristics, you would not have understood me to be God, that is to say. In the same way, he told Arjuna 9:5, behold my magnificent form, and revealed his Aishwarya. And Sri Vrindavan also, even while displaying the glories of his charm and beauty, he showed Brahma thousands upon thousands of his four-armed forms. So yeah, in the Brahma Vimohan Lila, when he reveals to Brahma that I'm God, and he was in the spirit of I'm God, right? That's the point that's being made here. So the point here in this first sentence is that when the Lord is exclusively manifesting his Ishvara Bhav, the Bhav that I am the Supreme Lord, and putting aside the sweetness of his human pastimes, that is called as Aishwarya in the view of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur at least. So he gives a few examples of that. The last example is very clear. Krishna is actually doing Madhurya Lila there in Braj, but Brahma comes, he does his I was going to say he does his nonsense, not criticizing Brahma. I'm not trying to get it nailed for aparad, but he does his thing. And so then after the Lord reveals to Brahma that, the jig is up, he shows Brahma that I'm God. So he was in his Ishwar Bhav. So that is called this Aishwarya. That's what he's saying. When the Lord puts aside the, you can say, ignorance of the divine ignorance of just being a normal, ordinary boy playing with his friends and so on. He puts that aside to show that he's God. This is called Aishwarya. So in this way, he's making some conclusions about the nature of Madhurya and Aishwarya. All right, next verse or statement. Now, description of devotees who are steadfast in Aishwarya again will be presented. I thought, maybe I misconstrued this. I wanted to bring up the point also just about the Lord's, because Sri Vishwanath was dissatisfied with the comment that he was dissatisfied with the Vaishnav's explanation that the Lord isn't really bewildered and that Uddhava isn't really bewildered. And I thought he's going to explain this, or maybe it will come up. I kind of forgot, but I'm going to bring it up now just in case it doesn't. Queen Kunti, in her prayers to Krishna right before he's leaving Hastinapur to Dwarka in chapter 8 of the first canto. So she recalls Krishna's pastime of being bewildered, Krishna's Damodar Lila pastime. So in our prayer, she recalls that pastime. And she recalls how Krishna was afraid of Mother Jasoda, even though he is the fear personified. So fear personified fears Krishna, but he was afraid of his mother. So I feel like this must be coming out. I thought it showed Sri Vishwanath in his commentary to that particular verse. He points out that the very fact that she refers to Krishna as the fear personified means that she herself is aware of his Aishwarya. Otherwise, she would not have referred to him as such. So she's aware of his Aishwarya by saying that statement. And then she also acknowledges that Krishna is afraid of his mother. And then she says that bewilders her. So his comment about that is that if Krishna was only pretending to be bewildered, she would not have been bewildered. You're not bewildered by someone she wouldn't have been bewildered if Krishna was just putting on a pretense. She'd go, okay, Krishna's just acting right now. So that wouldn't have been bewildered. So he comments the very fact that she's bewildered by this, even though she's aware of his position as God, but seeing him bewildered by in fear of his mother means that she's genuinely astonished. Like, how is this possible that he's genuinely afraid of his mother? If he's just acting, then that would not have been bewildering for her. This is his comment there to that particular commentary. So his fear of his mother is genuine, and his being God is also genuine. And so how both features are existing in one form, that is what's bewildering for these devotees like Kunti, Uddhava. Like, what? How is this possible? So, of course, we hear this is due to the Lord's Achintya Shakti, that he can be the repository of these contrary qualities. Okay. So I wanted to comment about that. Maybe it comes up, but I actually didn't remember, so I wanted to bring it up here. Okay, so having spoken of the Lord as a repository of these two qualities, he speaks of the devotees' awareness of these two qualities, especially as they unfold in the Leela. And I think the indication here is the implication of this sort of discussion is how it impacts the Raganuga devotee's approach to his own worship and contemplations about Krishna. So this is the implication for this particular discussion. As this is still the Rag Vartman Chandrika. Okay, so he says here, now a description of devotees who are steadfast in Aishwarya again will be presented. Sri Vasudev told Sri Krishna and Sri Baladev, you are not my sons, you are directly the supreme personalities of Godhead. Ouch. Arjuna also, after seeing Krishna's universal form, said, "O Krishna, please forgive me for whatever I may have said earlier out of carelessness or affection, not realizing your glories." Bhagavad Gita 11:41. So the statements of these devotees reveal that their respective parental and fraternal moods diminished upon seeing Sri Krishna's divine opulence, right? This is called Aishwarya Gyan. Inversely, even after knowing, meaning after hearing, that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Lord himself, not the slightest sense of any heart-wrenching awe and reverence is produced, but instead the mood of one's established relationship with Sri Krishna remains firm. Then that awareness is called Madhurya Gyan. So Aishwarya Gyan means when God shows himself to be God, that Madhurya part gets diminished, even if you have an intimate relationship with Krishna. But if the Madhurya part doesn't get diminished, even in spite of Krishna's demonstration of some godly quality, or else you hear about his godhood, then that is called Madhurya Gyan. That is a difference. Okay, next paragraph. The Yugal Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam 10th Canto, chapter 35 states, the gopis tell Mother Jasoda, quote, Gandharvas and other sub-demigods devoted to the Shrutis surrounded Sri Krishna on all four sides and worshipped him with hymns, flowers, and other paraphernalia. And Lord Brahma and others offered obeisances at his lotus feet as he herded the cows along the path. So all these celestials are glorifying Krishna, so he's God, clearly. That's the point here. These statements show that the cowherd boys, headed by Sri Dharma and Subala, saw Brahma, Indra, Narada, and other demigods offering prayers with songs and musical instruments, and worship with all paraphernalia and obeisances at Krishna's lotus feet as he returned from the forest. Nevertheless, their mood of natural friendship with Krishna was not even slightly diminished. So when Krishna returns from the forest, that's what's been described here. So the gopis, Yugal Gita is, so Yugal Gita happens after the Rasa Lila, right? So, and Yugal Gita, the spirit of separation is there, that after meeting the beloved, there's separation, not because the Lord has gone elsewhere like in Prabhas, but because the Lord is gone for the day. And he's doing activities with the cowherd boys for the day. And so the gopis are feeling separation, having consummated their love with the Lord in the Rasa Lila that happens a few chapters earlier, just a few chapters before. So they're feeling separation from their beloved as he goes off to the forest in the day. So in that spirit of separation, the Yugal Gita is sung. They're singing about his activities in the forest during the daytime. So here they're describing Krishna's return to Braj from after, spending the day herding the cows and so on. And as he's returning, there's a whole beautiful description is given here. And part of the description is all the celestials are worshiping the Lord. And all of Krishna's cowherd boys, they are seeing this. But even though they're seeing this, their Madhurya part is not diminished by this. Like, oh my God, Krishna's God, look. They're like, at the most they're thinking, this is, wow, our friend is God. Not that God has become our friend, but rather the opposite, my friend is God. So they're thinking he's just my friend. It's kind of cool that people worship him. And this is of course true for the other residents of Braja, which is going to explain. So this is being cited as an example of Madhurya again, that you can actually experience the Lord's opulences or hear about them, or else hear about them. But the Madhurya part doesn't go down because of that experience, unlike in the case of Arjuna or else Vasudeva and Devaki, when they see the Lord's opulences, that Madhurya part gets diminished. They're like, oh my God, you're God. And the mood changes. Okay, next paragraph. Upon hearing of this form from the cowherd boys, the Braja maidens were seen to exhibit an unshakable fixation in their amorous feelings, Madhura Bhav, for the Lord. So in the same way, there was not the slightest weakening of Brajeshwari Srimati Jasoda's maternal mood when she heard the words that Brajaraj Nanda Baba spoke to pacify the Brajvasis. This is after the, I think this is after Govardhan Lila, or this is after Nanda Baba was kidnapped by Varuna and Krishna rescued him. And that time, Varuna Dev, all the devatas, they were worshiping him. So is it either, they're referring to one of these pastimes, I actually forgot, I should have took notes on this part. So when he returns, he's all the cowherd men, they're sitting there like, talking to Nanda Baba, hey, your son might be God. And he's like pacifying them. And Mother Jasoda, she's just in the room, she's hearing these things also, maybe serving the different bridge buses. And they're just thinking, whatever, even if he is God, he's my son, I'm a chastiser for, being a nonsense. So this is just another example of the same point. Rather, due to the manifestation of material pride, her maternal love for Krishna strengthened, and she felt, I am blessed that my son is the Supreme Lord himself, right? Just like if you have a child and your child becomes the president of some country, then it's not that your parental feelings would be diminished. Actually, it increased. Like, how nice, my son has become the leader of the country. How wonderful. You don't immediately start relating to him as the president. You still relate to him as your child, your son, not otherwise. Although your pride will increase in them, like, how wonderful my son has become the leader of the country. So this is an example being given here, that even they hear that he's God, that only increases their pride in their son. Their Madhurya mood is not diminished by this. So these words indicate that the surge of maternal pride in the heart of the Shoda strengthened her Vatsalya Bhav in the same way that an ordinary mother whose son becomes the ruler of the world immediately feels even more motherly love for him. Oh, there it is, yeah. So the Saka said, we too are blessed that our friend is the Supreme Lord. And the Braj Gopi said, we are blessed that our beloved is the Supreme Lord. From these statements, we can understand that even after the knowledge that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead came to their attention, Ishwar again, the individual moods of the Brijvasis became strengthened rather than diminished. So that is the difference between Aishwarya Gyan and Madhurya Gyan. So when the Brijvasis meet with the Lord, Aishwarya Gyan does not manifest in them. When the Brijvasis meet with the Lord, Aishwarya Gyan does not manifest in them. Meeting is like the cool rays of the moon, but separation is like the scorching rays of the sun. Due to the burning pain of separation, Aishwarya Gyan sometimes momentarily manifest. Even then, because of the absence of reverence, the heart does not palpitate and feelings of awe are not aroused. Hence, this cannot really be accepted as Aishwarya Gyan. So this is a point that's very, I wonder, this is a point that Sri Vishwanath writes about a little bit more elaborately in the Rasalila pastimes, I think in chapter 29, but I forget which verse. What happens when there's meeting with the Lord, Sambhoga versus separation with the Lord. So meeting with the Lord is compared to cooling rays, right? It's very, very pleasing. But separation to the Lord is compared to the burning sun, right? So there's two things here about the burning sun analogy. On the one hand, it's burning, it's hot, like it's super hot, it's burning. So separation creates this sort of burning sensation. The other reason for the sun analogy is that the sun gives illumination also, right? It shines brightly shines brightly and thus reveals objects in the world. So the idea here is that the separation is like the burning sun. Not only is there the pain of separation, but there's also the illumination on the Lord's Aishwarya in the feeling of separation. So when you read, for example, the different, let's say, Gitas, the Venu Gita is there, Pranaya Gita is there, Gopi Gita is there, Yugo Gita is there, Viraha Gita comes up, and then later on, Brahmara Gita. You're hearing all these Gitas of the Gopis, and each of these Gitas are representing different moods of separation from Krishna. You'll see in those prayers that they speak about the Lord's Aishwarya, often referring to his pastimes and other avatars, etc. So there's a clear awareness of his Aishwarya. So the question might come up, well, no, look, they have Aishwarya Gyan here. So Sri Vishwanath wants to clarify why that is the case. Well, that's because separation is like the burning sun. So it causes the burning part is this, the experience of separation. And the illuminating part of the sun analogy is that his Aishwarya is a moment in that experience. And so they speak about his Aishwarya in that spirit of separation. But even when speaking about the Aishwarya, they relate to that awareness in a sweet way, in a Madhurya way. In other words, their hearts do not palpitate like, oh my God, he's God. That is the meaning of the sentence here. The heart does not palpitate and feelings of awe are not aroused. Like in the case of Arjuna seeing the universal form, his heart palpitated as I think you can imagine, seeing like this huge form, like devouring things. And so, but here there is no heart palpitation, even though they're having this illumination of the Lord's Aishwarya. And therefore, Sri Vishnu's concluding that this cannot really be called Aishwarya again, because there is no diminishing in the Madhurya, there is no real feeling of reverence that is aroused in the heart because of the illumination of the Lord's Aishwarya. So this cannot be called as Aishwarya again. Okay, that's his point there. I forget what commentary, it's a little bit more elaborate than what I explained. I caught the essence of it, but it's a little bit more detailed. It's there in the 29th chapter. I would have to look it up though. I forgot which shloka it comes. Very interesting point about the nature of Sambhoga and Madhurya. For example, okay, in the Brahmara Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 47, the gopis say, in his incarnation as Rama, as if an ordinary hunter, he peers from a hidden place the monkey King Bali with arrows. Mm-hmm. Generally, a hunter kills animals out of excessive greed for flesh, but Rama killed Bali without reason. Thus, he is even crueler than a hunter. A hunter's apparently, they don't hunt monkeys because you can't eat their flesh. So the fact that he killed a monkey makes him even more cruel than a hunter. They're criticizing Krishna because they're a little upset on him. Brahmara Gita, he's promised to come back to Braj, he's not coming back. So they're upset. So they're speaking in the spirit of man, separation. They're upset, angry. So. Okay, another one. Furthermore, being subjugated by a woman, his wife's Sita, he cut off the lusty Suparnaka's nose and ears. In his incarnation as Vamana, like a crow, who snatches a fragment of food and then kicks away the basket from where he took it, he accepted Maharaj Bali's worship and then bound him with the noose of Varunadev. Therefore, we do not want any kind of friendship with that black complexion person. But still, we continue to talk about him as it is extremely difficult for us to give this up. That's funny. You talking honestly. Why don't you stop talking about him? Well, we can't. That part we can't do. So at least we will not have a relationship with him, but we can't stop talking about it. It's a very difficult thing to do. Okay, this is an example of how the illuminating part of separation gives awareness of the Aishwarya without diminishing their Madhurya Gyan. Okay, so this verse from Brahmara Gita reflects the distinct moods of the Braja maidens who do not nurture any special awe and reverence for Sri Krishna, even after hearing of his opulence. Before Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, the Brajvasis had no Aishwarya Bhav and never thought our Krishna as the Supreme Lord. And although they were confronted with evidence that Krishna is the Supreme Lord after he lifted Govardhan, and even when he returned from Varun Loka, the Brajvasis' hearts were filled only with feelings of pure Madhurya Gyan, just as before. So Sri Vasudeva said to Krishna and Baladev, neither of you are my sons. Ouch. In contrast, although knowledge of Krishna's divine opulence arose in Nanda Baba's heart after he heard from Varunadev and Uddhava, right. Nanda Baba never had the sentiment that Krishna is not my son, nor is it mentioned anywhere that he ever spoke in this way to anyone. Thus, we can see that the Brajvasis were always completely full of spotless, pure Madhurya Gyan. In contrast, the Madhurya Gyan of the associates of Dwarka was mixed with our awareness of the Lord's Aishwarya. Okay, I think it should be clear. Next statement here. Okay, so here a question may be raised. Oh, Vasudeva Nandana, Sri Krishna performed human-like pastimes in Dwarka with the awareness that I am the Supreme Lord. Did Nandana Sri Krishna have the same perception in his Vrindavan pastimes or not? So what is the Lord's relationship with his Aishwarya and Madhurya? So we heard a previous statement about the devotee's relationship with the Lord's Aishwarya and Madhurya, their perception of it. So what is the Lord's relationship with his Aishwarya and Madhurya? That has been described here. Okay, so if one says, yes, he knew it, then at the time of being bound by Mother Jasoda and Dhammabandhana Lila, tears would not have flowed from his eyes out of fear of her. Right. It is not befitting for learned devotees to suggest that his fear and tears of fright were simply a show. Okay, it's here. Only less intelligent people will say this. If the learned devotees were to accept this explanation, then Kunti Devi would not have said in Srimad Bhagavatam, quote, "O Krishna, when you broke the yogurt pot, Mother Jasoda decided to punish you so that you would not create such mischief again in the future. When out of anger, she started to bind you with a rope, your eyes became agitated out of fear, and tears mixed with kajala flowed down your cheeks and drenched your chest. At that time, frightened of your mother, although fear personified as himself afraid of you, you lowered your head and hid your face behind her. Remembrance of you in such a condition leaves me bewildered." So we already described this verse. Through these statements, Kunti Devi has expressed Aishwarya again, as it is indicated by the phrase, fear personified is himself afraid of you. Her words, frightened of your mother, signify that the fear in the heart of Krishna was not artificial. It was genuinely felt by him. This is the conclusive opinion of Kunti Devi. If she had thought that Krishna was pretending to be afraid, she would not have been puzzled. Yet, if we say that he did not know he is the Supreme Lord, then the question arises as to what it is that covers the eternal knowledge of Krishna, who is a personification of unending bliss and knowledge. So here, his awareness of God is denied. Does Krishna know that he's God? Well, it's denied. Why? How can you say it's denied? Because he demonstrates fear of his mother, for example. That's the example given. How can you exhibit such fear if you are aware that you're God? You literally can't be afraid of anything. Just like if an ant approaches you, suppose you can hear an ant talk. An ant approaches you and says, "I'm gonna mess you up, man." You just saying that, you giggle. You must giggle. There's no question of you being afraid of such a proposition. So if you know that you're God, you have that awareness, how can there be fear? That is impossible. So the fact that he's crying in fear of his mother denies his awareness of his godhood in that moment. Okay, so if that is the case, so the opposite question is brought up. If he doesn't know he's the Supreme Lord, then what on earth can conceal that awareness? How is that possible? So then this is being described here. So he says this thing. We see that ignorance, avidya, as a function of the illusory potency, Maya, throws all living entities into the bondage of the material world and veils the knowledge of their constitutional position to make them experience only suffering. I think this should be self-evident for us. In the same way, the embodiment of the function of the spiritual potency, Chit Shakti, that is a pastime potency, Lila Shakti or Yogamaya, covers the knowledge of Sri Krishna's associates, such as Mother Jasoda, who are beyond the three modes of nature. This enables them to taste the mellows of the happiness of Sri Krishna's supremely sweet pastimes. So the comparison being made here is that the Maya Shakti, what was I reading? Okay, sorry, got distracted on this point. Because I was just studying first chapter of the 10th canto. Anyway, sorry. So the example we made here is that the Maya Shakti causes the absence of awareness of God and of ourselves, our true nature as spiritual potency, Jiva Shakti, right? Ishara Petasha Viparyo Ashmitihi, Tamaya Yapto. So this is the nature of Maya, that it causes us to have the absence of awareness of Bhagavan. That's called Isha Peta. And it causes Ashmitihi, which means an absence of awareness of our own nature as consciousness distinct from matter. And we identify with matter, Atmanam Trigunatmakam, Paropi, Manyute Anarta. Although we are superior to matter, we identify with the three gunas of Prakriti. This is our root Anarta. And then from there, we accumulate the other anartas in this world. So this is due to Maya Shakti. So just as Maya Shakti eclipses our awareness of ourselves and also of God. So the Chit Shakti, called as Yoga Maya, she eclipses the awareness of the Braja associates. their awareness of Krishna as a supreme Lord. That's what is being said here. So Yogamaya covers the knowledge of Sri Krishna's associates, such as Mother Jasoda, who are beyond the three modes of nature. This enables them to taste the mellows of the happiness of Sri Krishna's supremely sweet pastimes. Just as the jivas, they would not be able to enjoy matter if they had awareness of their own selves, right? That's not possible. You can't be self-realized and find matter enjoyable. So in the same way, in a similar way, this comparison has been given. In order to relish the sweetness of Krishna Lila, there can't be so much awareness, or really any awareness, of his godhood that will prevent one from being able to relish its sweetness. That's what happens to the conditioned souls, frankly speaking, in our movement also. When they hear Krishna Lila, especially his Lilas related to the Madhurya Lila, they're not able to relish it because they're like, he's God. So they have to offer up so many explanations so that, we don't forget that he's God. He's God. We got to be careful. Got to be, don't hear too much. Just, you can read the verses, but don't look into the explanations of them. One of our temples, actually in Chalpati, the temple is there, a temple of brahmachari is there. So when they got to the 10th canto, I was there when they were studying 10th canto. And when they got to the 5 chapters of the Rasa Lila, they just literally read the translations, and there was no class. They just read the translation. There was no class. There was no discussion about the verses, nothing, because that may cause disturbance, I guess, to their brahmachari consciousness. I don't know. That may have been part of the reason. And, we got to make sure that we don't diminish the glory of God by his seemingly erotic pastimes or whatever. So the reason I bring it up as an example is that one needs to be open to, of course, this is the case for the eternal associates. They're actually eclipsed by Yoga Maya. That allows them to relish the Lord's Leela. Otherwise, the Aishwarya Gyan will prevent them from appreciating them. And I'm making a rough parallel there with the way that sadhakas act in this world when it comes to Krishna Leela also. They're not able to just relish it and appreciate it because he's God. We got to make sure we give the right purport so as not to diminish his glory and all that. It makes it hard for them to dive in. And of course, that is fair for the conditioned souls. But if we don't open ourselves up to divine ignorance, because this is basically what's being spoken of here. In the material world, we have the not divine ignorance. What's the opposite of divine? Not divine. I'm looking for a better word than that, though. We have the real ignorance. So here, there's a divine ignorance possible also. And we need to be open. Let's see who's comment here. Demonic ignorance. That's not exactly the word I'm looking for. I guess ignorance.
How about mundane, maybe?
Mundane. Yeah, that's okay. Mundane is a good one. Hi, Mother Gal. It's been a while. We've missed you.
Aw, thank you. Me too.
I was literally about to message you like, girl, did I offend you? Like, where you been?
Oh, no, not at all. There's a whole lot. There's a lot of kata. I'm like,
yeah, I know. It's too much, actually. I'm like, overwhelmed. Now I know what they mean by shower kata. I'm like, oh, I'm drowning. I can't swim very well also. So this is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. I'm identifying with Ananta Shesh. but instead of tongue, it's the ears.
Oh my God, that's a good one. That's actually a really good one. So so here we have the real ignorance, and there they have the divine ignorance. And when we, as sadhakas, we want to, especially on the path of Raganuga Bhakti, in a sense, we're trying to open ourselves up to divine ignorance. That allows for that engagement with the infinite reality. Otherwise, we are too minute to even audaciously think that we could commune with an infinite reality in that way. An ant can never commune with the human body. I always give that weird example. So a finite reality can't commune with an infinite reality without the sense of some divine ignorance. And so Raganuga Bhakti, I would say Bhakti in general, but especially Raganuga Bhakti is sort of an opening of the heart to the descent of divine ignorance. making this relationship with Krishna possible. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit more here. We're going to pause because my time is up, but this section is longer than I remember. Okay, we're going to pause there. He's established the question that's being answered here, being answered here is, if Krishna isn't aware of his godhood, then what possible force can eclipse that awareness? And so the answer that's being given is basically divine ignorance. First, it's given in relationship to the Braj associates. Just as the Maya Shakti eclipses the awareness of the conditioned souls, so the Chit Shakti eclipses the awareness of the Brijvasis. That allows for them to engage in these swift pastimes with Krishna. And now extending that further, the Chit Shakti characterized by prema eclipses the awareness of Krishna. And that's the answer to that he wants to develop. But we'll take that up tomorrow because it's already 9:10 here. So we'll take a little pause here. And okay, so Mukunda has a question and then go up.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so really nice section today. This point about the Brajvasis, their knowledge of Krishna's Aishwarya, or their awareness of Krishna's Aishwarya features eclipsed by Yogamaya. And I was, it's funny because when you were bringing the example of the in Chaupati, they skip over that, or they just read the translations from that section, so as in, one could say so as to not lose sight of Krishna's Aishwarya side. But I also experience where devotees, will spend a long time not reading about Krishna's pastimes, and then when a section of Krishna's pastimes come up, everyone is suddenly like, oh my God, it's so sweet. Like, it's like everybody very much, I feel like everyone a lot of the time very much does recognize the sweetness. And my understanding of it is like, I don't even know Krishna as God. So it's easier. It's like easy to just hear like a story about a child killing demons and just be like, oh my God, that's so sweet. So I guess kind of my question is, it almost seems like sometimes devotees are able to easily pass over that Aishwarya thing and just understand the Madhurya. Obviously they're missing I'm missing the piece that Krishna is actually God. And I'm just hearing like, that's a cool story. Or that's very sweet, that's very romantic. So I'm kind of wondering, like, does it matter that a devotee misses that God piece and just appreciates the sweet piece?
Very nice observation and good question. I guess my sense of it is that, especially in ISKCON, because we do spend so much time with Krishna being God, that it's just part of our psyche, even if by osmosis. So it may not be like a conscious awareness that Krishna is God, so to speak, like in a very conscious way. But in the culture that we've grown up in, at least in ISKCON, by osmosis, it's very much a part of our awareness. So we can hear about Krishna killing a demon without us thinking that it's myth. Because that's the reverse. When someone who doesn't have that culture, they hear about Krishna, oh, this is just a myth. And these are the myths that these people believe in. But for us, it's not a myth. This is Krishna's story. It's very real. This is reality. That's because we've already been injected with the consciousness of his godhood through the culture. And so whether you have conscious awareness or not, that's already part of your psyche. As Sri Vaishnava has commented here, there can really be no Madhurya Lila without the Aishwarya as the ground of Madhurya. So there is the consciousness that Krishna is God. And there is that appreciation, even if it's not always explicit in our awareness, it's there for sure.
Or it's not like realized.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, it's not realized, but neither is a sweetness realized. It's just appreciated, or to whatever degree it's appreciated. And I think, and to the point that I was speaking of with the example of the Chaupati devotees, we've talked about the distinction between the Lord's Nitya Lila and his Naimitika Lilas. So a lot of the Lilas that devotees will entertain, at least in public spaces, which is probably the right application, is the Naimitika Lilas. So Krishna killing demons, Krishna going off to Mathura and so on. But the Nitya Leelas, which is basically Madhurya Leela, like is primarily central to the Nitya Leelas is the Madhurya part. And the other relationships are kind of helping that part. Those stories, devotees seem to show a lot more resistance to because of fear of Sahajiyism or, taking it cheaply, et cetera, et cetera. That part devotees are very resistant to. They don't want to think about it. And so I remember one time being in Chicago. Oh my God, I was out of control. I was in Chicago and Rohan Paswami was giving a class and he was trying to impress upon the minds, like, be careful about hearing Krishna's Madhurya Leela. And that this is like, very dangerous or something. He was that side of the story that we always tend to hear in ISKCON. So of course, being they call it a gadfly, the contrarian that I am, I raised my hand and I said, well, according to Prabhupada in the Krishna book, introduction, I read the introduction, I read the part. Prabhupada said that Krishna's pastimes with the gopis is especially important for the liberated, for those who are desiring liberation, and for the materialistic person. And he says, precisely because these pastimes resemble the mundane affairs in the material world, for that reason, even the materialistic person should hear about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. And so Rama Paramahansa, he kind of retorted, well, Krishna has so many pastimes with the cowherd boys and with Mother Jasoda. And I said, yeah, but Prabhupada says the pastimes with the gopis. That's like what it literally says, the pastimes with the gopis. And so he kind of just like let it, yeah, that is also there. They said, any other question, he kind of just dropped it. So I distinctly remember that because anyway, one of his disciples after the class came up like, well, where's that section at? And, we started having a little bit of a discussion afterwards. So anyway, to my point is that there's a resistance to that level of remembrance, which we're speaking to. But the point I'm making, as far as the implication of what we're hearing from Sri Vishwanath here, is that our hearts have to be open to the experience of divine ignorance, and which means at some point in our journey, we have to allow ourselves to cross the threshold of fear that keeps us from like engaging with this aspect of Krishna consciousness also. Otherwise, we're at the present moment, it appears to me that we're trapped inside this constricting boundary that says that you can't engage with that whatsoever until you're like purified to the nth degree, not appreciating that maybe engagement with that is going to bring us that purification to the nth degree that we're seeking. So yeah, like this. So that's how I'm intuitively answering that question, that we definitely appreciate Krishna as God. That allows us to hear his leelas without questioning them and without thinking that they're myth, just by growing up in the culture of ISKCON. And that we should also take it a step further at some point and allow ourselves to embrace the beauty of the Nitya Leelas. That is the goal of attainment, at least for the Raganuga Sadhaka. This is Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Okay, Mother Gals got something to.
Yeah, I wasn't able to understand how it is that the separation that the gopis experience leads to their experience of Aishwarya again.
No, so the idea is that just as the sun, two qualities, it has heat and light, right? Those are the two qualities. So the separation is compared to the sun. So the heat part is the pain of separation, that's the heat. And the light part is that it shines light on the full extent of Krishna's being, including his opulences, his position as God. So when they're with Krishna, they just experience him as the playboy, basically, dear Lalita. But when they're separated from Krishna, they get awareness of his godhood. So they'll talk about him being like other avatars. They'll talk about all his opulent pastimes of killing this demon and killing the other demon and doing this and doing that. So there's clear awareness of his Aishwarya because of the illuminating side of separation.
Yeah, this is the gap for me here. How it is that just because they're in separation, they can see that part more clearly. I don't know what's missing for me here.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a subtle subject matter.
You know,
Explain.
if you're not seeing Krishna, right? You're not seeing him, right? So then how come you're seeing?
No. So seeing here means remembrance, right? So when they are separated from Krishna and then they remember him, the
Yeah.
illuminating aspect of their separation gives them access to his Aishwarya part also in the remembrance, right? So they're just remembering their beloved in their heart, but they're remembering him in separation. So the illuminating aspect of separation is giving them aspect to the full. Just like sometimes when you remember someone that you know, when you were with them, you don't appreciate them so much. We have this experience in the daily. And then when you haven't seen them for a while, or you're separated from them, and you think about them when you're away from them, you start to remember things that you didn't really think about when you were with them. Like, oh man, they did this and they did the other thing. And yeah, and then that separation is giving you an appreciation for all these other qualities that you didn't appreciate at all when you were with them. So union with Christians like that, they don't appreciate is not the best word to use here, but that part, their appreciation of his Aishwarya is not really part of their psyche when they're with Krishna. Separated from Krishna, and then they remember him in that separation, then all his qualities come to light for them, including his Aishwarya. And therefore they can offer prayers about how he's other avatars and he does this thing and that other amazing thing and so on.
Okay, so it's not that the Madhurya part is not present in the separation. It's that the Aishwarya becomes more prominent.
Yeah, the Aishwarya becomes illumined.
Yeah.
In that separation, but the Madhurya part is still most prominent. So that's what Sri Vishwanath's point was, that even when they're remembering his Aishwarya, their heart doesn't go like, oh my God, he's God. They still don't care about that.
Yeah. I meant more prominent, not most prominent. I meant
right. I mean, it comes to the surface more. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. This is much better for me now. Thank you so much.
Jaya, okay, we'll continue on this journey of Radha Chandrika tomorrow. Hariom Tatsat, thanks a lot, family. See you soon. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Ragvartma Chandrika ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Go.
Thank you.